that there is that delay, so she'll let us know when we're ready to go live.
We should be ready to go now.
Thank you. So this is the calling to order of the Development and Operations Services Standing Committee. And just to start, I'll just wish everyone a happy International Women's Day. We had a great event here in town. So thank you to staff and everyone who put that together. I'd like to start by reading the land acknowledgement. Today we acknowledge that Collingwood is located on the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, including the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee and Ojibwe peoples, and on lands connected with the Lake Simcoe-Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818. This is the home of a diverse range of Indigenous peoples whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors of our society. So now, the second item on the agenda is to have a motion to adopt the agenda, which is that the content of the Development and Operations Services Standing Committee agenda for March 8, 2021 be adopted as presented. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Doherty. And someone to second that? Councillor Jeffrey, thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest, committee? And if there are any during the course of the meeting, please declare it as soon as you've determined that. Yeah.
Chair. Sorry, I do have a declaration of pecuniary interest this evening. It's in regard to deputation item 5.2 from the Blue Mountain Watershed Trust Foundation. And I will declare a disqualifying conflict as the trust will be asking for support from the town. And I'm a volunteer member of their board of directors.
Thank you. Are there any other conflicts? I think I can see everybody on my screen. That's okay. All right. Is there any business arising from the previous meeting? Seeing none. Deputations. We have 2 deputations this evening. The first one is with respect to the Heritage Property Tax Program. Jennifer McEwen on behalf of the Collingwood Heritage Committee. Deputy Clerk, would you be able to let her in, or Stephanie?
Stephanie just let her in. If Jennifer, if you want to turn your video on, we can see you then.
There we go.
Unmute. Okay, so you can see me and hear me? Correct, yes?
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Okay. Well, as long as you can hear me, I guess. All right. So getting started then. Stephanie's got the slides up. Okay, so next slide. And I'm just going to do a recap. I know I spoke on through Heritage Week and went through the objectives and policies of the Heritage District Plan bylaws. So just a very quick recap is to avoid demolition and removal of heritage buildings, to encourage preservation and restoration based on documentary and physical evidence, to retain, repair, and restore original architectural features, and to remove incompatible past alterations. Next slide talks about the goal of today's presentation, and I think I had given you a little heads up on that. Next slide, Stephanie. Was supposed to be goal of today's presentation. I guess it didn't come through. So what we're here for today is to request an increase of the Heritage Relief Program to 20%, and then also to request a further increase of 5% annually until the maximum of 40% is reached. Now, what is the Heritage Tax Relief Program? There's municipalities throughout Ontario. I believe a couple of years ago, it was about 22, and I think we're edging up to around 30 or slightly over, which gives the option of establishing municipalities of establishing a heritage tax credit program under the Municipal Act. And there's the program has a credit of between 10 and 40%, which is given to the heritage property owners for restoration. Next slide next slide. What is the objective? Now, this is to provide municipalities with an incentive to encourage the preservation and restoration of heritage buildings. It assists the property owners to preserve our past by offsetting some of the maintenance and rehabilitation costs that come along with heritage property stewardship. Next slide. Now, currently, we have 3 different programs available for heritage. The first one is a grant program of about $3,000 annually for the owners if they match it or exceed it. The second is a major redevelopment and restoration tax for property owners who are investing $200,000 or more to restore their property. And the one that we're referring to tonight, which is the Heritage Property Tax Relief Program. It's currently at 10%. You'll see by the slides later how that matches up with the other municipalities within Simcoe County. And with this, the owners are obligated to an agreement to maintain the property and fulfill the requirements within that agreement. So property tax in Ontario is divided into 3 different areas: municipal, county, and provincial. And because the heritage tax is based on a percentage, those who are paying a higher tax rate will receive a greater rebate. The properties that are eligible, next slide. Next slide, Steph. Properties that are eligible for this program are what we call Part 5. That's the downtown core of Collingwood and surrounding the main street area. And then Part 4, which are specific properties throughout the town that have been designated. And again, as I mentioned, the owners with this program have to enter into a maintenance agreement with the municipality. As well, next slide. Next slide. As well, the municipality monitors the condition of the property through annual inspections, and the owner must carry out the work according to an approved priority maintenance list. Now, there's initial fee for this, and then an annual application is required each year. Next slide. So this is, oh, I guess we're a little ahead. That's okay. So the program is funded, again, as I mentioned, by municipality, province, and Simcoe. There's numerous municipalities throughout the province that have passed these tax credit bylaws. And with the tax relief along with grants, because it is more expensive to maintain an older home than it is for somebody buying a new home, this is a great relief, and it encourages owners to conserve their properties, and it helps to reduce their costs. So we're next slide. Next 3 slides actually are going to take us into these are charts. Now, the first one shows you the municipalities within Simcoe County on this program. Apparently, Beaton is going to be joining us soon, but you can see from the charts the percentage of tax reduction that's being offered to the property owners is at 10% for Collingwood and 40% for the rest on this chart. And I believe that's all of them within Simcoe County, actually. Beaton will be joining us. Now, the next slide is, it gives you an example of how it's broken down. So you'll see from 2020 is preliminary. There's a couple of people that had asked for extensions. And I guess it all comes in at this time of year. So our numbers are a little bit estimated. They're as of March the 1st. but pretty close. So you'll see that the town contributing roughly 13,000, almost 14,000. But in total, what goes into the community for these owners is over 29,000. And then it gives you a breakdown of the previous years. The next slide, which is also very, very rough projections, will show you the differences between 10% and 40% and the breakdowns with the town, the county, and the province. So at 10%, with Collingwood, the municipality, contributing $15,000 to 87, we're actually putting into the community 33,000. Now, once you get up to 40%, you'll see that last number under total. It's substantially different, and it does help to contribute to the community. So that you can always look to later if you wanted to refer to that. Again, rough estimates for those numbers, but it gives you an idea. Next slide explains the reason that for increasing and renewing this tax, because it contributes to the community improvement, which is part of this town's strategic plan. And it's reasonable to consider this because we are at the very lowest scale in comparison with other municipalities. Collingwood's rebate is exceeded by the amount. So the more we contribute, the more that will be coming in from the county and from the province. Now, the 4 pillars of society, there's culture, and under culture, well-maintained heritage properties give the community a sense of place and enrich our lives. It attracts arts and cultural activities. Under economic, this will continue to attract visitors and businesses which support the economics and the economic rewards of tourism. Under environmental, adaptive reuse and preservation of heritage properties is preferable. It's certainly better than demolishing and filling up our landfills and rebuilding with new materials. So there's a sustainability side to this as well. From a social standpoint, it creates employments at all levels from the businesses. And it also gives the community a sense of pride and appreciation for their surroundings and for everyone that lives here and visitors to enjoy. So next slide is facts to ponder in making your decisions. So the designation of properties is accompanied by an obligation of the owners to comply with the heritage bylaw through these agreements that I was explaining. And they are more expensive to maintain than a new built house. Heritage is a very important cornerstone of Collingwood. It draws a lot of people, and we should be very proud of what we have here because many of the towns in Ontario have not kept them up as well as we have, but we need to keep it up. And we're often mentioned in publications as leaders. So it's always struck me that when people travel, for some reason, they're always drawn to these older buildings and sites. And, I've often wondered why. There's something within us that recognizes that there's something of value here. These places can't be replaced. And a good example would be the Parthenon. I had done a study when I was in school, and we had seen a documentary on the Parthenon. It has taken them, they've been working on that for almost 40 years to try and figure out how these people actually built this. Apparently, there is not a straight line in those pillars or the building or even the floors. And yet there is an optical illusion of it being perfect. They're within 1/20th of a millimeter, which they call entasis. And there's a lot of money that Greece has put in to accomplishing the redevelopment of the Parthenon. So it's always a shame to see any place like that go to ruins, because we really cannot afford to rebuild. The technologies and the craftsmanship that are used to rebuild these buildings have been lost. A lot of those skills have been lost over time. And in many cases, we just simply cannot replace and redo these places. And so it's always very sad to see any of them go to the wayside. So yes, I will close with final thoughts that I do believe it's important to continue to support our heritage here in town, and hope that you consider increasing the benefits by renewing the heritage tax relief with the 20% up to 20%, and then following that 5% per year until we reach a maximum of 40%. We have a lot of new subdivisions being built in the area, and I understand there's a mandate by the province to double our population to 40,000 by the year 2030. So that will bring in a lot of tax money from people that and not properties that are heritage. So there should be some money coming in to help with that. So I thank you for listening today, and I will leave you with those thoughts, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Jennifer. Would any of the committee members have any questions? Yeah, Deputy Mayor Hall.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. Just a very technical question, and perhaps if there isn't an answer tonight, if we could get an answer at some point, but it's more just out of interest. The one slide that showed our counterparts in Midland, Penetang, Tay, Bradford West, Gwillimbury, I believe, showed a percentage, and the one for the township of Tay showed a percentage that was broken out in both land and building. Correct. I was just curious as to what the difference was and why.
Well, I think under heritage, they don't always only deal with buildings. So Justin may be able to shed a little bit more light on that. But I have run across some information in some of the stuff that I've read about the heritage committees, and they will often look at things like older parks. It may have something to do with watersheds, I'm not sure. Maybe old farms. Justin probably could shed more light on it than I can, but there is an element with preserving that deals with just land. Yeah.
Would you like to hear from staff on that, Deputy Mayor? Yeah. Adam, would you like to speak on that?
Through Madam Chair, Deputy Mayor Hall, you're right that we don't have an answer to that specific question right now, but we're going to be reviewing this request in more detail and providing some sort of thoughts and recommendation to council on this. So there'll be more to come.
Thank you. Yeah, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Just a brief final comment, and that is, I know that this is being referred to staff, and I'm pleased that it's being referred to staff in March of the calendar year, because it's come before council at least once during the budget process, and I think it has come before council previous to that. And it just, I think, would be nice if we could be proactively looking at the program as a whole and how we can include it in a budget process as opposed to sort of at the final moment. And so I hope that by referring it to staff tonight, we'll have that opportunity when it comes to look at the 2021, 2022 budget. Yeah, 2022 budget. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Clerk.
Through the chair to the committee, I'm just wondering if it would be worthwhile considering item 7.1 that's listed on the agenda right now, just because we do have the Heritage Committee member with us, and it's discussing this very topic that we're dealing with. If the committee,
thank you.
We could move that up in the agenda.
Is the committee agreeable to doing that? Yeah, okay. So let's go to 7.1. The recommendation is that the minutes of the Collingwood Heritage Committee meeting held February 22, 2021 be received. To start, could I have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Doherty, Councillor Jeffrey, thank you. Would anyone have any questions about these minutes? So then I'll ask all those in favor of receiving the minutes. And that's unanimous. So the committee the recommendation for us, I'll read it in. Whereas in November 2019, the Collingwood Heritage Committee supported Vice Chair Leeming address the Development and Operations Standing Committee, requesting consideration be given to increase the percentage of tax relief through the tax relief program to 20%. Therefore, be it resolved that the Collingwood Heritage Committee Support Chair Jennifer McEwen addressed the Development and Operations Standing Committee to request consideration be given to increase the Heritage Tax Relief Program to 20%. And further, that the Heritage Tax Relief Program be increased 5% a year until a maximum of 40% is reached. So the staff recommendation that's before us tonight is that the Heritage Tax Relief Program request be referred to staff for review. Could I have a mover and a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Doherty, Councillor Jeffrey, thank you. Would any Deputy Mayor Hall, would you like to speak on this recommendation?
Just to the comment I made earlier in referring it to staff, could we add an amendment and it would provide direction that staff come back with this minimum of 20% for consideration for the 2022 budget, and then the 5% here and after implementation.
So rather than having staff, just so I understand it, rather than having staff come back with their review, you would like this committee to proceed now with the recommendation from the deputant?
I would, and the reason I say that is that this is, for me anyways, round 2, and I felt that when, and maybe I've got my timing wrong, but I recall the presentation that was given by Ms. Leeming at the time, and the feeling for me was that there was a willingness to do this. It was sort of late in the game, so to speak, in terms of the overall budget that had already been put together. And I think that I would be inclined to actually give direction to say, like, let's see a report that comes back with this implemented in the context of whatever other changes maybe need to be done, but that it could move forward in 2022 as opposed to just being another item for consideration. I think my consensus is, or my thought is, that there seems to be some consensus that this is a priority and that there's the continuation of values within the community grow, and that the priority from those within the community and those who are coming to the community voice their praise for the heritage, not only the conservation district, but the program that's in place, that it's a priority in maintaining the asset long term.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Before I turn it over, I just wondering if your comments could be addressed by giving staff a clear timeline for returning with their recommendation on how this could be implemented, so that it doesn't get lost, but we still have the benefit of the staff thoughts on this. I'll just leave that thought. Councillor Doherty?
Thank you, Chair. I just will speak in support of Deputy Mayor's comments. This was a very good and illustrative presentation, so I certainly won't repeat it, but we have looked at this many times in the past, and we do have a very significant heritage asset in this community. We're one of the first communities, actually, we were the first community to be listed on the Canadian Register of Significant Historic Places. And yet we lag far behind some of our colleagues in this county in terms of providing support for heritage. So this just makes all the sense in the world, and I'm very supportive of the Deputy Mayor's suggestion here.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you very much, Chair Hamlin. And I too am supportive, definitely, of taking a look. I'm assuming though the next step after it comes back to us would be another referral to the budget process, because whatever we do now won't be able to be done in the context of the budget. At least at this point, we wouldn't have enough information. And I guess through to staff, is that a correct assumption that our discussion as a committee would be limited to assessing the value of this and protection of that heritage investment versus our ability to afford it?
Who would like to answer that? Yeah, CEO Skinner?
Thank you, Your Worship. I see Treasurer Quinlan has also turned on her camera. Typically, when staff put forward a recommendation that may affect the next year's budget, we will make it subject to council's deliberations on that budget, and make it explicit often that it should be looked at in the broader context. I think that council has some more flexibility on what they wish to do if they want to say, as a council, we want to, we're making this decision once it goes to council. I would recommend that you as a council would keep your options open as you move forward. And I also am not particularly familiar with this information and this request, although I know it's been made before, and I have no concerns with the opinions of council members, but I'm not aware of, for example, the needs articulated by the community, the number of people who've asked for a change, what the effects might be on, for example, the county needing to still collect the same amount of money, but over, maybe just a different suite of payees. So I, in response to Councillor Jeffrey, it would be my recommendation that once a decision is made, it is referred to the budget process, but I think as council, you would have some more flexibility to be stronger on that being included. Thank you.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Jeffrey?
It does. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. So what I have, are you going to, Deputy Mayor Hall, make a motion then to move forward on this?
Well, through you, Madam Chair, maybe through to the Deputy Clerk and the CAO, I think we're all on the same page, and I would just like to get the best path forward in terms of process. A couple of weeks ago, I guess at our last meeting, I made a notice of motion that went to council on an item, and I could do that, and we could move this up to council, or just simply just refer it with a slight amendment that it be that a report come back in the context of the budget process. I see the Deputy Clerk's got her card up.
Deputy Clerk Dahl?
Based on the comments that Deputy Mayor Hall made, I don't know if the committee would be satisfactory with this wording, but that the Heritage Tax Relief Program request for deferral to staff be referred to staff for review with a recommendation to include consideration of an increase to the Heritage Tax Relief Program in the 2022 budget be brought forward by no later than, and then whatever date you guys would want the report back by.
That be satisfactory, Deputy Mayor Hall?
Very much so. And I would look maybe to staff to fill in the date based on priorities.
Okay. Shall we come up with a date so we can have the motion seconded? Would there be a suggestion, Deputy Clerk Goodall?
I don't work for the planning department, so I'd hate to stick them to a date, so I'll refer that to Director Farr.
Okay, Director Farr, over to you.
Yeah, I think that through you, Madam Chair, to Deputy Mayor as well, I think the language target the third quarter, target sometime in the third quarter, that type of language would be helpful. The Heritage Committee right now is dealing and will be dealing with a number of high profile new projects. They'll be evaluating development activity in and around the downtown area. And I think they're really sinking their teeth into their mandate. There's a lot of interesting things happening. So I was considering that staff might engage with the committee in a kind of broader range of issues, and this would be one of them. And we are, as you know, we're somewhat resource constrained, so it's helpful to have some flexibility. So what I would do is ask for a target in the third quarter, and staff will go and have some further discussions with the chair of the committee, and maybe discuss having some sort of a general strategic planning session among the group, and this could be one of the items that we bring back and report on, because there's a lot going on, and it's worthwhile, I think, having some flexibility to generate a quality report.
Okay, thank you. I understand that. Would that be satisfactory, Deputy Mayor? Yes, it's good. Okay, so Deputy Clerk Dahl, could you read that out again with the date filled in, and then we'll get a seconder for that?
The Heritage Tax Relief Program request be referred to staff for review with a recommendation to include consideration of an increase to the Heritage Tax Relief Program in the 2022 budget be brought forward by no later than the end of the third quarter of 2021.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder for that? Councillor Jeffrey, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. All right, thank you. All right, we'll go back in our agenda to the second deputation. This is going to be a deputation by Duncan Bristow on behalf of the Blue Mountain Watershed Trust. Stephanie, can you let Mr. Bristow in?
You should be joining us.
Duncan, I think you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I've
okay.
got to do a couple of things here. Okay, yeah, I seem to disappear and then come back in. Can you hear me?
You're good now. You're good.
Yeah. Can you see? Oh, you can see me. Yes, I can see myself. Cool. All right. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Blue Mountain Watershed Trust. I'm going to be talking a little bit about Silver Creek Wetland sign replacement along Highway 26. So by way of background, oh yes, first slide, sorry. Perfect. So by way of background, in 1985, the Silver Creek wetlands were evaluated by the NVCA to be a Class 1 wetland. Based on that evaluation, the Ministry of Natural Resources declared it provincially significant. And that's a very important designation for a wetland and provides some additional protections. In 1988, the town of Collingwood passed a resolution calling for the retention of the wetland as a public access to Georgian Bay. Now, during the intervening years, significant development pressures continue to threaten these wetlands. The Silver Creek wetlands are at the mouth of Silver Creek, covers an area approximately 166 hectares in the Blue Mountains and in Collingwood along the Nottawasaga Bay shoreline. The wetland provides a variety of very important biological, social, and hydrological functions. This very large wetland is one of the few remaining, I should emphasize, coastal wetlands. Coastal wetlands are particularly threatened because of shoreline developments. on Nottawasaga Bay and plays a vital role as a habitat and spawning ground for a diverse variety of birds, fish, and plant species. Some are endangered and threatened, and we have a responsibility to protect their habitat. Next slide, please. So what's the proposal? There are two signs which you may or may not be familiar with along Highway 26 within the town boundaries, indicating the existence of the approximate location of the Silver Creek provincially significant wetlands. One is just east of County Road 21 and faces the eastbound traffic. The other is facing the westbound traffic and located near the Silver Glen neighborhood. Both signs are showing their age and really don't adequately reflect the significance of the Silver Creek wetlands. Sorry about that. Our proposal is to replace these signs, which are currently 2 feet by 5 feet, with new signs that would be 3 feet by 5 feet. The Blue Mountain Watershed Trust will look after the cost of the signs and the associated hardware, and the town of Collingwood would then install the signs. Next slide, please. Okay, so what do they look like right now? Obviously, they're showing their age. This I believe is the one that's close to 21. And currently has 2 logos on it, the Blue Mountain Watershed Trust logo and the town of Collingwood. Now, if you go to the next slide, you can see what the proposal is. Basically, we've got 2 options here, design A and design B. And we've now included 4 logos on it. So we've got again, the Blue Mountain Watershed Trust logo. We have the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation logo. And then we've also got Town of Blue Mountains and Collingwood logos on the side, because the wetlands do include both communities. So that's basically the summation of my presentation. We aren't really looking for money. We're just looking for some kind of support in kind, I guess, with respect to installing these signs and replacing the worn out signs that are currently there. They'll be slightly bigger. So that concludes it, and I thank you very much for your time and attention.
Well, thank you very much. Interesting to see what the future is going to hold there on Highway 26. I understand that there's a staff update on the matter that you're speaking about. Is there anyone on staff who'd like to address this? Director Slama? No. Yes.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin.
Hi, thank you.
Yes, so we have been speaking with Duncan and his other colleagues at the Blue Mountain Watershed Trust. And yeah, as a corporation, we have offered our services in kind to install the signs in our agreement in that. And I think we also agree that the signs out there now are dated and are in need of replacement. We appreciate their efforts to work on the design and get the job done.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's great. CEO Skinner?
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. And I just had one small comment for Mr. Bristow, which is, as the former CIO of the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority, I know that these wetlands are also within that conservation authority. So I thought it might be useful for the Blue Mountain Watershed Trust to also talk with that other, I'm sure, interested partner for their consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mayor Saunderson? Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And Duncan, thank you very much for your presentation. We certainly support all the work you do at the Blue Mountain Watershed Trust. And so I'd be very happy to move that we provide the support and cooperation to assist in getting these new signs up.
Fantastic. And that's seconded by Councillor Jeffrey. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you very, very much for your time.
Thank you. Right. Stephanie, can you tell Councillor Doherty she can return to the meeting? So now we're on to the next section of the staff report. Of the agenda, which are staff reports. And the first one is the wastewater performance report. So can I turn this over to Director Slama? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Manager McGinnity is here this evening, and she will speak to the report that she's put together with assistance from Supervisor Adams on the wastewater treatment plant. This is a report that is required to be submitted to the ministry annually by the end of March, and it's being presented here to committee and council for your information and endorsement this evening. With that, I'll pass it over to Manager McGinnity.
Great. Thanks, Director Slama. So yes, as Director Slama mentioned, we have provided a copy of our 2020 annual performance report for the town's wastewater treatment plant and sewage pumping stations as part of your agenda package for your review and endorsement. First slide. As the owner and operator of the town's wastewater treatment plant and sewage pumping stations, we are required to report to the Ministry Environment, Conservation and Parks on the performance of these facilities each year. It's a condition of our environmental compliance approvals. And while the 2021 report has been provided for your information, I thought I would touch on a couple of the highlights this evening. So next slide. The wastewater treatment plant has a rated treatment capacity of 24,548 cubic meters per day based on average day flows at the plant. So in 2020, our average day flows were 18,854 cubic meters per day. And you'll note that this is a bit higher than last year, but in line with similar to what we saw in 2017. And quite often you'll notice this variation, and it's based on wet or dry years and the precipitation that inflows into our wastewater system. Next slide. In terms of the final effluent quality, the final effluent quality in 2020 was very good, actually. Our final effluent samples met both the operating objective and the compliance limit for all parameters throughout the year, and generally with sufficient buffer to not raise concern about the ability of the facility to continue to meet this effluent quality criteria. Next slide. However, there was one partial treatment bypass event that occurred in June 2020. And this was the result of a high intensity, short duration precipitation event that created very high flows through the wastewater treatment plant during a short period of time. So while most of our treatment processes could handle these higher flows, not all of the water was properly disinfected with the UV system that we currently have. Our operators used chlorine to supplement the UV disinfection during this event. The Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, or MECP, was notified of the event, as was the local medical officer of health. And both the MECP and medical officer of health were satisfied with the town's response. In spring 2020, we initiated a detailed review of our environmental compliance approvals for the wastewater treatment plant and sewage pumping stations. And we decided to do this when we noticed some discrepancies in the 2019 performance report for the wastewater treatment plant. This report, the 2019 report, was the first performance report that was prepared to satisfy the requirements of an amended ECA that was issued in January 2019. And through this review, we identified several items that were new to that ECA that had not been incorporated into the town's monitoring and reporting program. So the town immediately addressed these gaps in the annual reporting requirements. We updated our influent sewage monitoring program to make sure we were testing for the right parameters. And we started recording the influent sewage flow data. Sewage pumping station flow meter calibrations will commence in 2021. And it's also important to note that the staff promptly advised the Ministry of Environment, Conservation of Parks of all these issues when they were identified. Next slide. So while there were various technical challenges that kept the operation team busy in 2020, I think the greatest challenge was finding a way to keep our operators safe and ensure we had continuous wastewater treatment services during the COVID pandemic. Through collaboration with other town departments and support from our operators, we were able to introduce schedule changes, have temporary office space created to increase distance between the operators when they're working at their desks, and we had access to all the required PPE. I'd say that the greatest ongoing challenge in regards to the COVID pandemic remains keeping up with some of the tasks that we are postponing during lockdown and stay-at-home orders. So these are non-essential tasks that we try to avoid having staff working together in close proximity or potentially causing operational disruptions. And so postponing those to when we're not in a higher level of risk with COVID outbreaks. Next slide. Another significant operational challenge in the wastewater treatment team in 2020 was the staff turnover. So with support from our HR department, we filled 5 positions out of the 8 existing wastewater positions. 3 were internal promotions and 2 were external hires. So training for staff in all these positions is continuing into 2021. Last slide. So overall, I think it was a successful year for wastewater in Collingwood, despite the many unusual challenges that we faced in 2020. And now I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, thank you very much, Manager McGinnity. Are there any questions or comments from the public before the committee considers the report?
I have one member wishing to speak, I believe it is Matthew Pretty, so I'll try to let him in. Just give me a sec.
Thank you.
Okay, you should be able to speak.
Yes, good afternoon. Manager McGinty, I have a general question for you. From a homeowner sense, I know with the pandemic, a lot of people have been at home more than usual. What does it cost per flush in the home? Like that wastewater that you see at the end of the pipe, at the beginning of the pipe, what does it cost per flush for a homeowner? Do you have an average cost of what that would be, please? Thank you.
Manager McGinty, is that something that you've calculated?
Through you, Madam Chair. No, unfortunately, we haven't gone to that level of detail with our analysis on the cost of wastewater services. We do have per cubic meter rates. And there is various rate structures that we consider in the town, obviously, right? So I'd say the best point of reference would be for residents to look at the rate structure. There is a consumption rate, and typically a flush, our rate is per cubic meter. A flush in these new high efficient toilets are about 6 liters. So that's 0.006 cubic meters. So you're looking at pennies.
Okay. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you.
No problem.
Are there any other comments from the public or questions?
If anyone else is wishing to speak to the staff report, could you please raise your hand? And it doesn't appear like there's anyone else wishing to speak to this item at this time.
Okay, I'll read in the recommendation. So it's PW 2021-04 Wastewater Performance Report. The council receives staff report PW 2021-04 and endorsed the 2020 annual wastewater performance report. Could I have a mover and a seconder for that? Mayor Saunderson, seconded Mayor Hall, Deputy Mayor Hall, thank you. And would the committee have any questions or comments? Mayor Saunderson?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Peggy or Manager McGinnity, the one overflow bypass that we did have, my understanding is that was a fairly heavy rain event, and that there were a number of municipalities in the region that also experienced a bypass on that day. Am I right on that?
Manager?
Yeah, okay, yes, through you, Madam Chair, to Mayor Saunderson. Yes, you're absolutely right. That was an extremely unusual weather condition that happened, and numerous wastewater facilities in our area reported bypass events that day. So we were not alone. I don't have the exact number, but absolutely, I know our health unit was busy dealing with calls, and our local ministry office was dealing with a lot of calls and reports on that.
And just if I could, by way of follow-up, and I don't know if you can quantify this, but on average, how many events, and I know storm events are getting more severe and also more frequent in the severity as well. On average, how many bypass events would we generally have in a year?
I don't believe there have been, I would say less than one. That's our average. It's been a couple years, I believe, since they've had a bypass event. And I would also say this one was extremely unusual in the timing. More bypass events typically occur during the spring runoff when you get those rain events tied in with all the melt happening. So that extra infiltration into the system really challenges our peak flows at our plant. So the fact that this happened in June was extremely unusual. Yes.
Okay, thank you for that, and congratulations to you and your team on an excellent compliance report. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I too would say congratulations during the year we've had. I'm sure for staff, it's been a significant learning curve. So, but as someone who's responsible at the end of the day, I guess I have to ask the questions. You know, we do emergency planning, and it's probably not likely that a global pandemic was contained within that kind of planning, but I'm assuming that absolutely it is now. That would be my first question. And then in terms of resources that you have, I was really concerned at the length of time that we had in terms of replacement staffing and recruitment, and if there's anything we're missing as a council in making sure you have those resources available to you so that we don't have those gaps in the jobs, particularly in something so important to our environment and to the convenience of the people of Collingwood. So thank you for that.
Manager McGinnity?
Sure, yes, I can speak to that. I would say that the pandemic also exacerbated the hiring process. There was a hiring freeze at the very beginning, so we weren't able to advertise externally for some of these positions. That did change, you know, a couple months in. I think town decided we needed to keep moving and keep business going. So that delayed things. But I would also note, you know, myself being new to the position last spring and a new supervisor, and she was also learning and, you know, struggling with the pandemic, just finding time to allocate to get these job descriptions and postings out was a little bit challenging. So, and then we did have a staff member leave in the summer as well. So it was kind of that constant cycle. Unfortunately, it was just one of those situations that we just plodded our way through and tried to pick away at it. And happy to say that we made it to the end by the end of the year.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Councillor Jeffrey?
No, just thank you very much again.
Yep.
Thank you. Would there be any other questions or comments? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to Manager McGinnity. I had just a couple of questions. And the first is just a follow-up. We've had a couple of questions in regard to bypass events. And I am just wondering, do we grab samples of final effluent when there is a bypass event so that we can assess the quality of the water that's being returned to the bay?
Yes, through Madam Chair. We do collect we are required through the ECA, again, our environmental compliance approval, to collect a sample as close to the beginning of the bypass event as possible. So that would be a grab sample, and depending on the type of bypass, as this was just a partial bypass of the disinfection process, you know, there's different levels of bypasses that could happen. This is one of the least significant, I would say, in terms of potential disruption to our effluent quality. Recognizing that it's passed through the previous portion of the treatment at the plant. So there are set parameters that need to be tested based on, you know, what level of bypass that happened. And if the bypass continues for more than 8 hours, we need to continue to sample at an 8-hour frequency.
Okay, thank you. Another note was in regard to the Black Ash Creek pumping station. And there was reference to damage that was done to the mechanism because it was clogging with rags, which I just found to be quite shocking. How much of a problem is this in the community? And do we need to undertake or perhaps re-undertake a public education campaign to make people aware of what is flushable and what is not flushable?
Yes.
Chair McGinty.
Sure. Yes, through you, Madam Chair. We did do some re-education last year when we were having these problems.
Yeah.
And I would note that it was because that critical piece of equipment, our grinder, was not in service that we were having these problems. So normally there is a grinder there that would shred this material before it goes through the pump, so then they don't clog the pumps. But yeah, so with the proper equipment now in place, we're not having the same problems. But I agree, it's shocking and disappointing that people continue to flush this non-flushable material. And we noticed it even worse during the pandemic with people flushing things like gloves and masks and stuff as well, just an easy disposal.
Thank
Those are
you.
your questions?
Good to know. Yes.
Yeah.
Just two more. So we last year in 2020 operated at about 74% capacity, and we did hit a peak of 79%. So what implications does that have in terms of any trigger for need for expansion?
Manager McGinnity.
Through you, Madam Chair. So as stated in our ECA, we are required to initiate an expansion when we're seeing these average day flows around 80% or exceeding 80% of our rated treatment capacity. So again, average day, not peak flows. Peak flows are those flows that you see during those storm events where there's that infiltration occurring. So from a wastewater perspective, we're really concerned about the average day flows, and we've been fairly stable, as you saw by my graph, over the past 5 years. I'm not overly concerned. I don't expect a sudden spike in average day flows coming. So I think we still have a few years to go before we need to really kick that project into high gear.
Great. Thank you. And then just one final question, if I may. There was some discussion earlier this year about participating with Georgian Bay Forever and their plastics mitigation. I'm just wondering what we are doing at our wastewater plant right now.
Yep.
Manager McGinnity.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. So certainly we have been communicating with Georgian Bay Forever about that program. And the only involvement they require, or support that they require from our wastewater operations, is a sample collection. So they're interested in collecting a final effluent sample of the water leaving the plant and doing the microplastics analysis or microfiber analysis on that sample. So they'd be providing bottles to our operators. They'd fill the bottles with the sample, and then I guess Georgian Bay Forever will come and collect the bottles from them. So yeah, our involvement is fairly minimal.
Thank you very much. Those are
No
my
problem.
questions.
Yep.
Thank you. Mayor Saunderson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just briefly on the Georgian Bay Forever project, they have gone out looking for 300 local residents to volunteer and to get a filtration system installed in their washing machines. The last time I heard they were, I think, getting close to 200. So if there are residents out there that are interested in participating in the program, please go online. You can go on to the Georgian Bay Forever website, and I'd look maybe to Manager McGinnity to see if we have the link on our town website as well. And I think they're going to start installing those filtration systems shortly this spring. So just by way of a brief update, but it's a great opportunity for us to participate in this project.
Okay, thank you for that update. Are there any other questions of the committee? Well, I have one. One thing I noticed, Manager McGinnity, was that during 2 power outages, town-wide power outages, there was, I guess, a temporary but an interruption in communication from 2 of the pumping stations. that were, I guess, relatively quickly remedied by staff on the ground. I'm just wondering, is there some investment that this community should be thinking about taking so that power outages don't have any impact?
Yeah, so that was an interesting situation. It's not something that they'd seen before, and I believe it was more like the power surge that impacted it. So blowing a fuse and impacting some of the equipment in one of our PLCs. So yeah, it's something that we can definitely look at in terms of surge protection or something for those facilities to try to help mitigate something like that in the future. It's a discussion we can have with my wastewater supervisor in our budget process this year.
Okay, thank you. All right. So I would like now to ask that we have a vote on the recommendation to receive the report that has already been moved and seconded. All in favor? And there are none opposed. Thank you. The next staff report is PW 2021-06, Accessible Transit Services. Director Slom, over to you.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. Yes, so this evening we've got Transit Coordinator Chris Wisniak here with us, and he will speak to the staff report that you have in front of you today. This report is in response to a resolution that was passed at the end of last year, just for staff to move forward to look at options for the town to continue to provide accessible transit services to our community. So this was kind of, this is our report on the first step, what we found out and our recommendations moving forward. So with that, I'll hand it over to Mr. Wisniak.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Slama. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of council. So this is in response to a report that we did back in November. Next slide, please. The recommendations had to deal with some COVID pressures we faced due to some operational issues that a lot of our providers were experiencing due to the pandemic. And the resolution that we brought to council was that in the short term, we needed to approve our Red Cross transportation services for a 3-month period, which would put it to March 31st, 2021. And that we would extend our accessible on-demand taxi with Ace Cabs until the same period. During that same time, we were also asked to look at and evaluate other potential options that we could have to be able to provide the services within the municipality. So what we ended up doing was going out for an RFI, for a request for information, to see and evaluate the market for these services. So we put out a document, an RFI document in February of this year, and we had 8 bid takers on it. However, we only received 1 submission. Next slide, please. So we received a submission from Voyago. They're a very experienced provider in Ontario. They provide both accessible and transit services to about 13 municipalities in Ontario. They submitted a fairly detailed plan on the delivery of both a fixed route scheduled service, similar to what we have with Red Cross, and an on-demand service similar to what we have with Ace Cabs, but it would be wrapped together in one contract. The current level of service, the proposed level of service was the same as we would have currently, and nothing would have changed. So our total budget and our total annual kilometers, we've had a pre-budgeted amount for this, but the price cost that Voyago submitted was about $195,000 more than our current level of service, which is fairly consistent with the cost that we are paying for our transit service per hour and kilometer, and what some of our neighbors with Simcoe County, Orangeville, and what they're paying for their accessible providers as well. Next slide, please. So we have two options to be able to continue to provide the service within the municipality. The first option is to continue with our current service providers. So that is with Red Cross Canada. The Red Cross service is currently covered in our 2021 budget. And then also continue with ACE Cabs to provide an on-demand service. With this service, we would require an additional $15,000 based upon ACE Cab's valuation, which was submitted around the time that we did the 2021 budget. So that would maintain our current level of service, and we would be able to work with Red Cross to look at efficiencies that we could build into the service. The second option that we have is to go out and issue a full RFQ or RFP for new delivery of specialized services. It would require us to be able to extend our current contracts in the short term to cover the time for procurement and contract startup. And it would be a higher cost to the municipality. And again, that's around $195,000. And the other option, and the other consideration with option B is that the length of the contract would be rather short because we're entering into a new transit contract in 2022. We were hoping to align both contracts together. Next slide, please. So some additional considerations to think about when we're looking at our options. The town of Collingwood, we've led putting interest forward to a study with the government of Ontario for the Inclusive Community Grant, which is providing monies to municipalities who are looking to provide better accessibility to their municipalities, to seniors and those with disabilities. The one big thing that the grant had in it was that they preferred that municipalities partner with one another to be able to help regional projects. So we reached out to the town of Wasaga Beach and town of Blue Mountains, and because we both run transit together, we had a letter of support from both municipalities to be able to put together a proposal to the provincial government for a grant to look at a specialized needs assessment in the Southern Georgian Bay area. And the intent of that study would be able to look at accessible transportation as a whole. And a lot of that came from some of the outreach that we did to some of our community groups whose bigger concerns were that a lot of their clients are traveling between municipalities, and having a service that may be able to cover the entire South Georgian Bay area may be beneficial to our communities. This grant has not been approved yet. We're waiting approval for that in the next upcoming months. So that's an additional consideration to think about when going for a new service. We may have the opportunity to evaluate the needs in our communities to be able to put together a terms of reference that could potentially deliver a more wholesome service. Next slide, please. So our recommendation would be to extend the current accessible transit operations with the Red Cross until July 30th, 2022, and that we negotiate a contract extension with ACE Cabs to provide our accessible on-demand services until July 22 as well. Our rationale for that, we will have a continued service with no interruption to our riders. We are paying a significantly lower cost to what the market value is. So I know that with this market evaluation that we've done, we are getting a fairly good deal. But at the same time, I'm in constant contact with the Red Cross, and we're looking at ways that we can perhaps enhance the service in the interim as well. This will also allow us to incorporate some of the ideas into our transit study as a whole. I've been working with the IBI group on our transit service review, and I've bounced a few ideas off them, and they provided some recommendations in the interim as well. It's provided very useful for us moving forward with this recommendation. And again, this will allow for the incorporation of the accessible study if it is approved by the provincial government. Next slide, please. And while I'm doing this presentation, I wanted to do some additional transit updates for some things that we have on the go. The Collingwood Transit Service Review and Optimization Study is about halfway through. We have just completed our first round of public and stakeholder input, which was very successful. I've done about 4 or 5 surveys for transit since I've been here in 15 years. And we've never had as much uptake as we've had on this round. And it's been really great to hear from the community on their needs for public transit. So now we are working towards recommendations on route structure and methods of service delivery and potential options on how to move forward with making Collingwood Transit modern and efficient. And we will be having a second public information center in the first week of April, which is tentatively scheduled for the first week, which we get to present some of these ideas that ourselves and the consultant have developed with our stakeholder input. Our COVID ridership continues to remain at about 50% of our normal ridership. It's important to note that with the 50% ridership and the loss of revenue, we are receiving funding from the provincial government under the Safe Restart Agreement transit portion that is covering a very large portion of those lost funds. And we are also still have reduced service, which is on the Sunday schedule that we plan on keeping in effect until caseloads have dropped and restrictions have lifted. We've also had a few ongoing issues at our transit terminal. This has been happening over the past year, and I've been in constant contact with our facility staff and with our OPP staff. You know, a lot of businesses have closed down and in the downtown area, and we are having some issues with loitering, and we've had some altercations at the transit terminal. And last week we had one that was a little bit more serious. So we have boosted up the OPP presence. And for the past week, we did put on a contracted out security patrol to be able to go through and keep an eye on what is going on. A lot of it had to do with public safety and public health measures, as well as a lot of riders or people who are using the transit terminal had not been wearing masks. So this was a way of mitigating some of the risk to the public. I did receive a report for the last 4 days of the security patrols, and it was very successful. So we're going to continue to work with our facilities team and the OPP and our bylaw department to look at ways that we can increase our presence there to be able to make sure that it's a safe place for our riders and the public to use. We are also going to be implementing our online transit pass loading system, which will commence hopefully by mid-April, which will allow riders to be able to log in through the town website and load their passes to help reduce the amount of face-to-face interaction that we're having at our town facilities to purchase passes. This was something that was included in the 2021 budget, and it's actively underway right now, and we hope to have it done soon. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay, thank you very much for that interesting presentation. Would there be any questions or comments from members of the public?
Chair Hamlin, we do have Matthew Pretty wishing to speak to this item, so I'll just unmute him. Hey, Matt, you should be good.
Good evening. Yes, thank you, Becky. Good evening, Town Council and staff. Yeah, Chris Serwizniak, the last part of your presentation, I'll get to that in a minute. Actually, I'll start with that. I noticed the car the other day there, and it's a small town. And with Wasaga Beach and the number 4, we do have a few new people that have arrived to town who have been using the homeless hotel at Cranberry Village. There's a cycling of people coming from the David Bugsby Center. That is overflowing here into town a little. But unfortunately, we do have issues with, like you're saying, with the mask, people not covering up. And then the bathroom really has been installed for the bus drivers and for residents, of course, but the drivers were the main priority at the time. And if they're not comfortable using that bathroom, then that means there's a big problem with regards to over access and possible persons sitting in the station for maybe too long due to various extreme reasons. As I've learned over time, that that's something that's been going on in the City of Toronto and City of Barrie for a long time. And they've got a security in the bus station, City of Barrie, to tell people to move along, and warm up and reconnect, get some water, use the bathroom. But I think the main thing is that it's made for the drivers to use during their long tours. They have a very long bus route that they do. As I've noted from being a rider over the years as well. With regards to this Voyago group, that's a good idea because that might speed up the need. Like if you got groups of people with the on-demand system, as Mayor Saunderson was alluding to with his Japanese tour, he learned more about this autonomous vehicle program. We've got Skynet and different groups with GPS and satellites and autonomous vehicles. This is up and coming. I think we should definitely look into that as a South Georgian Bay initiative. As a third option, we have Red Cross, we have Ace Taxi, and then with this Voyago would really allow for people in a more of a medically centered way to take part in that vehicle on-demand service. I think that's a brilliant idea to look at that. If the cost is excessive, what are we getting out of it? How many vehicles will they have on the road? What's their driver time like? And how can they be contacted? And what's the cost of the use? Is if it's free or if it's not free? I'm not sure what the cost is. But well done. You've addressed some key issues, and I would just say maintain that presence for all users of that area so that there is a cycling of use instead of persons. It's been a cold winter though, let's face it. Everything's going according to plan, but I think we need to step up that level of secure connection. CCTV isn't going to solve everything. CCTV gives a general sense of security, but we need to go maybe a step farther so that we're getting people moving on their way and continuing to connect with the town for what it's for. This is not a sleepover camp. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. All right, so what I'll do, Deputy Clerk Dahl, is there anyone else who would like to comment on this?
Sure, I'll just call to the gallery because we do have a couple people in attendance at the meeting. So if there's anyone else wishing to speak, if you could please raise your hand now. And there are no hands raised, so there's no more public comment at this time.
Okay, so at this time I'll read in the staff recommendation. That council receives staff report PW 2021-06 accessible transit services, and that council directs staff to extend the current accessible transit operations contract with the Canadian Red Cross until July 31, 2022, and that council directs staff to negotiate a contract extension with Ace Cabs to provide accessible on-demand services until July 31, 2022, including an additional $15,000 for 2021. Could I have a mover and a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Doherty, Councillor Jeffrey, thank you. Would the committee have any comments or questions? Mayor Saunderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to say that I'm I will absolutely be supporting this initiative. This is an important segment of our population that we need to make sure that they're getting adequate transportation or access to adequate transportation. And so I see this as an important issue, and looking forward to seeing how the transportation study comes out and whether we can find some synergies there. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Chair. And just a comment. We have seen some very successful demonstrations of on-demand public transit in other communities across the country. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing what our consultants will come back to us with recommendations in that regard.
Thank you. Would any other committee member like to speak? Deputy Mayor Hall?
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to Mr. Wisniak, just a quick question. Looking forward, the one slide, there was talk about partnering with our neighbors in Wasaga Beach and Town of Blue Mountains. Given that Clearview is part of Simcoe and the county's link service runs through Clearview, is there an opportunity that they could be a fourth partner in that discussion?
For you, Madam Chair, to Deputy Mayor Hall. Clearview can certainly be included in the discussion. They have been part of our stakeholder discussions in our transit study as well. They are covered under the Simcoe County Link Service through the accessibility portion of their transit. So it would make sense. We could certainly have them involved with it. And, you know, I think looking across all the communities is always a beneficial asset. So I can certainly reach out to them, and it's not too late to do that. So we can certainly look at that.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Hall?
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. And just for my own benefit, because I should know this, and obviously I'm missing something. So when you mentioned that Clearview is covered under the link program through the county, what differentiates them versus, say, us and Wasaga Beach, given that we're all part of the same county? Just for my benefit. Thank you.
Again, through you, Madam Chair, to Deputy Mayor Hall. The AODA Act specifies that the same area that you have covered under transit, you need to have covered under with specialized transit. So the main core of the Stainer route is covered by the Simcoe County Link Service. I'm not sure of their exact details, but I do know that the Link Service does cover that part of their route. And the Simcoe County Link Service also covers the portion of the Links route that comes into Collingwood and Wasaga Beach. They only cover the corridor of their service area. They wouldn't cover the town of Wasaga Beach or the town of Collingwood or Clearview, just their corridors. We did reach out to them looking at other options for service levels, and unfortunately it wasn't something that they were looking for.
Okay, any follow-up, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. No, that was perfect, and I appreciate the knowledge. Thanks.
Would anyone else have a question or a comment? Okay, then I will ask that the committee vote on this recommendation from staff. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is 6.3, the part lot control exemption bylaw for Summit View Phase 2. And Director Farr, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think there's a presentation log for this. So very briefly, part lot control is a technical form of land division. And in this case, There are 17 blocks that are proposed to be divided. This is at the Summit View subdivision. And you can see on the right side of this slide here, the area highlighted in red, it's the southern extent of this phase of the development. Next slide, please. So included here are 15 lots that are being split into 30 semi-detached units and 2 blocks of 6 units each for another 12 units, a total of 42 units. Next slide, please.
That's the last slide.
That could be all there is to it. There was a note that the planner had made in the report speaking to rear yard access and town homes. In this development, what's been approved is a rear yard access by way of the side yards of the end units of the townhouse block. So the issue there is that there's no way for residents to get from the front of their house to the rear portion of their house. There's no dedicated corridor in the building. So what happens here is that there's an easement around the outside units so that people can access their backyards. So in simple terms, it means if you want to cut your grass, you have to take your car or your lawnmower out of the garage and then walk it around the perimeter down the easement. So these are 6-meter town homes, which are increasingly seen in Collingwood. And there's a question that staff are going to be looking into in future townhouse developments, and that is there a better way through unit layout that you could achieve direct rear yard access, which is generally viewed as a more kind of sustainable form of getting in and out of your yard. But this 6-meter unit creates some challenges in that you're not able to provide a 1-meter dedicated access through the lot. So it's something that we want to explore through pre-consultation in site plan applications and subdivisions and related rezoning applications to see if there are solutions for achieving that through access in these more narrow units. That's my presentation. Glad to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Deputy Clerk Dahl, would there be anyone in our audience who would like to have a question or comment?
If there's anyone wishing to speak to the staff report, if you could please raise your hand. And it looks like there's no one wishing to speak to this item at this time.
All right, so I'll at this time read in the staff recommendation. That staff report 2021-03 part lot control exemption bylaw blocks 255 to 269 and blocks 283 and 284 Summit View Phase 2 be received, and that council enact and pass a part lot control exemption bylaw to allow for the creation of 42 lots consisting of blocks 255 to 269 planned 51M-1170 for semi-detached dwellings and blocks 283 and 284 planned 51M-1170 for townhouse dwellings. Could I have a mover and a seconder for that recommendation? Mayor Saunderson, Councillor Doherty, thank you. Would the committee have any questions or comments? Deputy Mayor Hall.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to Director Farr, and the answer could come later if unknown at this time. But for this developer, this is not their first project. It's certainly not their first project within Collingwood either, using this concept. And I'm just wondering, is this a different design when you talk about access to the rear that is been laid out on streets over in Pretty River Estates as well as Creekside? Because there are certainly units there that do have access through, say, a door out the garage out the back. And they're decent plans, and if they're deviating from those plans, it's unfortunate because that seems to be a good fix.
Director Farr.
I think there's probably, through you, Madam Chair to Deputy Mayor, there's likely some examples in the community. That 6-meter wide unit, though, creates some challenges because what happens is you're stacking the garage in front of a kind of a rear ground floor room. But I'm trying to open up a conversation for trying to create more livable, higher density neighborhoods. And this 6-meter unit is sort of squeezing things a little bit. So we're asking applicants to try to explore different solutions, including wider units on the end, extra parking if you can get it in on certain units, and also where it's possible to vary the townhouse width throughout the development to provide a variety of choices. It's just generally, in my experience, preferable to be able to have that through access as opposed to kind of marching across your neighbor's rear yards to get to your backyard if you're doing any work or bring any material in. But yeah, like I say, we were just trying to open up a dialogue with the development industry on this unit type.
Any follow-up, Deputy Mayor Hall?
Yes, thank you. I completely agree with what the director's saying, and I just was sort of off the top of my head thinking of the two communities that they've already built where there are examples. But I understand the difference, the subtle differences between the plans. I'm hoping, and this is a huge macro, and it's not a question, it's more of a statement, and that is that in our OP review, I think the intention and the intent through provincial guidelines as it relates to increasing density within our built boundary, from a macro perspective was a good thing. But it's really unfortunate that we've created these communities where, and I have to be careful because they are neighborhoods, and I certainly know people that live within them, but we're creating neighborhoods where there's no sense of place and there's no sense of use. Because the lots are so narrow to meet the provincial density guidelines, I think that they work extremely well in much denser urban areas that have much greater opportunity to access a variety of urban transportation or public transportation. But the vehicles that we now see up and down these streets, because they don't have sufficient units or sufficient parking with either in their single garage, double garage, the driveways themselves, and because the lots are so narrow that you don't even have sufficient width between driveway to driveway to park one vehicle, two vehicle that you used to. You do see within Mountain Croft, I think by default, where people who are guests of residents there are now using the parking space that was intended, I believe, for the public park that's there. But that's certainly lacking elsewhere, and it's really a shame because the streetscapes are not what they used to be or should be and could be. And as the density continues to grow and the meters between homes shrinks, it's just going to be the problem will only continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else on the committee have a question for Director Farr or a comment? Okay, seeing none, my comment was my concern, and I leave this with you, Director Farr, for consideration, but is with the county moving to a new system of garbage pickup, where, as I understand, the residents will have large garbage bins. Very narrow lots with no rear access is a problem for where these bins are going to be stored. And I know when Toronto introduced this kind of garbage pickup system, maybe 15 or 20 years ago, it created no end of problems. And I think in many communities, these very large garbage bins end up on the front porches of these narrow homes, which is not a great look for the community. And I'm sure not an optimum solution for an unsuspecting homeowner who buys a unit, not thinking about where the garbage can is going to go. So I just am in full support, obviously, Director Farr of staff working with the development community on this issue and maybe coming up with some design guidelines that can address all these kinds of issues. So thank you, and I'd like to then bring this staff recommendation to a vote. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is 6.4. It has to do with the Collingwood General and Marine Hospital site plan control with a minor adjustment for a storage building. Director Farr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a site plan, a minor site plan for the construction of a storage building at the hospital property. You can see the location and the image to the right. It's at the northern stretch of the property. There's a bit of a change in the lay of the land, sloping towards the east, so towards the right of the image, between Napier Street and this street here. That's Napier. In any event, this facility will result in the removal of 2 sea cans that are there now and provide a cleaner and larger space for equipment for the hospital. Next slide, please. So here you can see the physical extent of essentially the square figure that you see with the hatching sloping in. That's the location of the new 12 by 12 building. And as I said, there'd be a removal of some containers that are now there now. Next slide, please. So there were some tree removals required to facilitate this. You can see the tree removals in the middle of the screen effectively with the X's through them. And I believe there's 7 trees being removed. 7. And the hospital is replanting 6 new trees and 8 shrubs. So you can see the trees to the left of the image in 2 swaths. There's 3, and then to the east there's 2 more. The effect of that is to try to soften the impact of the physical structure on the residential development to the west. It's Moberly, I believe. Sorry, not Napier. And then on the western extent of the building itself, there's a proposed 8 lilac shrubs. Next slide, please. The building is going to be a combination of this royal blue fox gray color. So it is a utility building, but they're picking colors to try to have it fit better into the landscape. So this is proposed as a minor site plan control approval with conditions that would be fulfilled to the satisfaction of the director. No site plan agreement is proposed in this case. All the detail is captured on the drawings. Glad to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you for that presentation. I'd like to first see if there are any members of the public who have comments or questions.
I'll just call for responses from the attendees. So if there's anyone wishing to speak to this item, if you can please raise your hand. And it appears that no one wishes to speak to this item.
Thank you. So I'll read in the staff recommendation that staff report P 2021-06, 459 Hume Street, Collingwood General and Marine Hospital site plan control minor adjustment for building storage be received, and that council approve the processing of the proposed storage building for the Collingwood General and Marine Hospital as a minor adjustment to the site plan control agreement, and that council approve the site plan development drawings for the proposed storage building for the Collingwood General and Marine Hospital, municipally addressed as 459 Hume Street, subject to the following conditions. 1, receipt of the following materials to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning and Building Services, being 5 sets of final drawings for signature, and 2, resolution of any related matters is deemed appropriate to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning and Building Services. Could I have a mover and a seconder for that recommendation? Deputy Mayor Hall, Mayor Saunderson, thank you. Would there be any comments or questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, bring this matter to a vote. All those in favor of the staff recommendation? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. The next matter on the agenda is 7.1, which we dealt with earlier. So then I'm going to proceed to item number 8, which is the consent agenda. The recommendation is that the general consent agenda, having been given due consideration by Standing Committee, be received. And further, that the information and opinions provided in the general consent agenda items are that of the authors and are not verified or approved as being correct. 8.1, Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, consulting on growing the size of the Greenbelt. 8.2, request for redesignation, 774-776 Mountain Road, that's Mountainside Sports. And 8.3, request for redesignation for Elm Street. Could I have a mover and a seconder for those items, please? Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Doherty, thank you. Okay. And then I'll call for a vote on that, and then we'll move to the items they wish to have pulled. All those in favor? That's unanimous, thank you. So Standing Committee, are there any items you wish to pull for further discussion? Seeing none, I'll move on to the item 8.2, which was the request for reconsideration for Mountainside Sports. The staff recommendation for that matter is that the request for redesignation of 774-776 Mountain Road, Mountainside Sports, be referred to staff for review in the official plan update. Could I have a mover and a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Jeffrey, Mayor Saunderson, thank you. All those in favor? And that's unanimous, thank you. Moving on to 8.3, that was the request for redesignation for 4 Elm Street. The staff recommendation is that the request for redesignation of 4 Elm Street be referred to staff for review in the official plan update. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Doherty, Mayor Saunderson, thank you. All those in favor? And that's unanimous, thank you. Item number 9 are the departmental updates or discussion. And I don't know of any. Deputy Clerk Dahl, are you aware of any for this evening? No, okay. On to item number 10, public delegations with a maximum of 5 minutes per delegation. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak to the committee this evening?
Madam Chair, we do have Matthew Pretty that would like to speak to the committee again.
Thank you.
I'll just let him. Okay, Matthew, you should be good.
Okay, I'll just wait for a second. Okay, I see my my identity on the digital television. I'd like to comment with regards to the deputation made by Mr. Bristow. Would the chair allow me to infer with regards to the wetland and the west side of Collingwood in relation to wetland and wildlife?
I'm not sure what your question is, but you have 5 minutes, Matthew, so.
Let's go to town.
Yeah.
Basically, that section of town indicates a side that joins over to Osler Bluff Road. Osler Bluff Road is very expansive. It goes from the water all the way to Poplar Side Road. that township line, like the Collingwood township line there, is a very large area. And I'd like to refer to the special counsel tomorrow night with regards to the tree removal request. And what Mr. Bristow is showing, he's showing that that section of land has significant wildlife, habitat intensity. The abundance of the pine, cedar, willow, dogwoods, grasses, mosses, and the wildlife there is significant, as stated in his breakdown with the wetland itself. I would have to say that when it comes to corridors and Greenbelt, interesting to see that noted there, what we should look at is when the design comes to council for things like protecting a significant wetland or housing developments that are asking for removal of trees. I wonder if we need to remain focused, and I would like the planner to respond to this, that what density could we ask developers to keep as a conserved amount of land? So with regards to, say, golf course, housing, significant wetland, like whenever there's encroachment and mixed use going on, what can we ask developers to do in relation to saving sections of land, to keep it wild, to keep a corridor, to keep a green belt in line with the 2,700 petitions last council, 2 councils ago, shows that a lot of persons are not happy about the design, for example, of the tree removal over at Lynxview. Could he briefly comment about the Lynxview development in relation to what Mr. Bristow is showing, that a significant wetland obviously is connected to more forest? It's not like, oh, a wetland and there's nothing else to worry about. You know, it's all connected. Could we ask a developer to conserve a certain portion of land to create a design that's not just a bare clear cut when it comes to something like the Cranberry Village McPherson issue and the significant wetland in and around that area? Is there an influence that the town council can keep repeating and say, hey, what is your buffer zone? What is your Greenbelt conservation plan? Could you please comment with regards to this corridor in relation to tomorrow night's special council as well, which is a planning and engineering discussion in nature with the McPherson clear cut? Thank you. I'll sign off.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. I think questions that are specifically related to the matter on the agenda tonight, we won't get into this evening. There can be a fulsome discussion on that tomorrow. I think you do have a broad question about what rights does the town have to preserve large areas when a development proposal is before it. So Adam, I'll turn that question over to you if I understood it correctly.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to Mr. Purdy. So my answer is a general answer. It's not addressing any specific development, specific matters that you raised. In the case of a development where there's an environmental issue that's been identified, there are often prescribed or mitigating plantings that are included in the planting plan. This is typically in the case where there's a natural heritage component. Some of the development, let's say on the north side and south side of Highway 26, in and directly around wetlands, includes intensive plantings that are intended to do 2 things. One is to keep people out of sensitive habitat areas, and also to restore and rehabilitate those sensitive areas, often wetland areas. So there are mitigating measures where an issue has been identified, in particular through our contract to work with the NBCA, who provides comment on those natural heritage issues.
Okay, thank you very much for that. All right, is that the only member of the public who wishes to speak tonight?
Madam Chair, yes, there's no other hands raised at this time.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is other business, and I understand a few of our committee members have other business tonight. Mayor Saunderson, were you one? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just following up on our last council meeting, we had asked that the Economic Support and Recovery Task Force be reconvened, and I was just hoping I could get an update through you from the CAO Skinner on where we are on that, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair Hamlin, to Mayor Saunderson. I was very pleased that the dynamic chair of the Economic Support and Recovery Task Force, Foster Williams, has agreed to take on some work with the task force. And he has kicked off immediately a survey of the members, the council participating members, as well as all the members from our local businesses, to provide some feedback both on what we've already decided to do and how it's working and how they feel it's being perceived in the community, as well as some new ideas from the any new ideas from the members of that task force. And depending what Foster receives in the first round, he may bring that task force back together again if they are available. And he did ask folks about their availability. And if they're not all available, he was going to potentially see if there were some folks available within the community to provide council with comments in the short term. So it seemed there was enthusiasm in the community to reply back to council's questions around if we're doing enough given the COVID situation today. Thank you for asking for that update, Mayor.
Thank you. Is there any follow-up, Mayor Saunderson?
No, that's good news to hear, and thank you, Foster and the group for mobilizing so quickly.
Thank you. Councillor Doherty, did you have a matter for other business as well?
No, I didn't. It is something that I was going to bring forward on the 22nd, as I wasn't able to provide sufficient notice.
Okay, thank you. Any other committee member have a matter under other business for tonight? I have one. I got an inquiry just before the meeting started asking about the proposed crosswalk at Niagara and First, and asking if this evening we could provide an update on the timing of the work to start. I'm wondering if Director Slama might have information at her fingertips to answer this community's question. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, this evening I don't have a further update with respect to timing right now, but that is something I can speak with Manager Velick about and provide an update at the next meeting or maybe at council.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you so much. All right, moving on to item 12, which is adjournment. Councillor Jeffrey, thank you. All those in favor? Thank you for the meeting, everyone. That's unanimous. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.
Bye.